It is time.
Yep.
Is it?
Yep.
Hang on. Yep, it is.
Is Jane in California today?
No, next week. Thank you, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the directors' meeting of the Lincoln City Council for Monday, June 1st. In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted in the back of the chamber. We'll go through our agenda here. Our first item on the agenda is the minutes, the approval of the minutes from May 11th, 2020.
Usually one of us does that by ourselves. So,
We don't usually talk a lot about that agenda
No.
item.
No.
We don't?
no.
Who
Okay.
has actually read them? Who
Do
got
we have
them
any
signed?
adjustments to this agenda?
No.
The only thing I'd like to add is if any of you would like to speak with any of the directors, maybe if you would let me know here early, and then we can have them down here at the end of our meeting, and we can kind of spread out in different areas.
Okay.
Do you have a,
Pat Lopez,
okay,
Chief Leibmeister.
Tammy, would you like to,
No, thank you. Those will cover it.
James Michael,
I think I'm fine for right now.
and none for you? Okay, yeah, I'm fine with those. We could have Pat Lopez and Chief Leibmeister stick around about 2:30. I'm guessing we should be about done. And we can meet them either in the back of the room or in the corner somewhere. Okay, thank you. City Clerk, what do we have for our agenda coming up?
Our agenda is pretty simple. The only items that I'll be calling together would just be items under the public hearing resolutions, items 4A and 4B.
Okay. Those are two separate resolutions. Okay. Anybody else have any other questions or thoughts about the agenda?
Is anyone here, I see the mayor, but I don't know if she's prepared to speak, but before we get into council session, I probably have a couple of questions about 5D, city clerk and alcohol applications.
Mm-hmm. We can discuss a little bit of that if you'd like.
And maybe Jeff answers the question.
Okay.
Before the public hearing?
Yeah, I want to get some procedural things understood before.
We can discuss that as part of our last thing on the agenda today in this meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. Like the mayor.
Anything else? Anybody? Okay. Mayor's office would like to come up and talk to us. That would be great. Thank you for joining us, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope you will forgive me if I keep my comments brief. I want to be able to answer any questions or engage with you as much as possible today. We are preparing for a 3:30 p.m. briefing, so there's a lot to do between now and then. If we can have longer discussions after the briefing, I'd be happy to connect. First off, you have been notified, as has the public, of a curfew that will be in place tonight, starting at 9 p.m., again, to try to keep peace, to keep people safe in our community. So that will be in effect until 6 a.m. And I have just signed the extension of that through the emergency order. As you know, the new DHM is also being put into place as of today, was put in place as of June 1st. And so bars were set to open this evening. And the curfew will make it difficult for them to have any patrons. So we're going to be, of course, having to deal with that today. And you will maybe receive notification from bar owners or the public, and want to make sure that you understand that conflict that has clearly been created between the curfew and the intended reopening of bars. Thirdly, I want to thank you for your input on the Economic Recovery Task Force that we've created. We'll be announcing the members of that group this week, and we took your input to heart, and we think we have a great group of diverse individuals with perspectives from different industries and sectors. And we're looking forward to launching that group to help create economic opportunity and rebuild our local economy from the impacts of the pandemic. The process around events in the time that we have limitations on public gatherings, I wanted you to be aware that the health department is developing a form for people who are planning events that would have over 500 people in attendance, so that those plans can be reviewed by the health department to provide guidance and ensure compliance with safety measures that are in place. So that is something I'm sure you can talk to Director Lopez about more in detail, but that is being developed. There's also a process being developed around the outdoor dining extensions that we spoke about in last week, and that form will be online to help facilitate and support our restaurants in their ability to expand capacity without increasing density. And we anticipate that city staff will have daily meetings trying to process as many applications as possible to make that as productive and effective as possible. And then lastly, not quite last, I would appreciate your support of the hate crime ordinance that is coming before you. And that will allow us, of course, to make both a value statement and a policy statement that allows for greater enforcement against those who choose to commit crimes with an intent to intimidate on the basis of hate and perceptions of difference. And last but not least, it sounds like you all received a phishing email from me today. It was not from me. I believe everyone knows that now, but we've talked to IS about trying to rectify and address that situation. But I was not trying to contact you earlier from that fake email address. So with that, any quick questions I can answer?
Any questions? Jane?
Mayor, I know that we've gotten some feedback from constituents about the televised events from last night. And can you share with us what will law enforcement policy be for those that violate the 9 p.m. curfew? Will we be seeing more arrests and less confrontation, or?
Right. I'll just give you the quick answer on this. And what the policy is of the Lincoln Police Department is to first to notify, to make sure people understand that there is a curfew if they do not understand, because we recognize that not everyone is going to get the message, even though we try to put it out there across multiple channels. And then secondly, if people don't follow the curfew, we try to educate and say, you understand there are consequences, here's what could happen if you do stay out after the curfew begins. And then if there's still a refusal, they would look to issue a citation. And if the people did not leave at that point, then there could be an arrest. That would be the final and stage. But they're not quick to that stage. That is not the desired goal for any of us. But we are trying to make sure that people are safe. We are trying to keep order and avoid people who are interested in chaos and violence and destruction from taking away from the important messages of our peaceful protesters, because we want to hear those messages. We want everyone to receive those messages.
Thank you.
Tammy?
Mayor, this may be a question for our police chief, or maybe perhaps our city attorney. So for the arrests that were made, do we know when those citizens get out of jail? Do they have to post bail?
I'm going to have to get back to you on that one.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. But that's an important question.
No problem. Thank you.
Sandra?
Okay.
Now, the sort of somewhat boring question about extending the certain SDLs. Do you know, is it the intent that the city clerk would be able to have the ability to issue them repeatedly? And what does certain mean?
We'll have to leave that to the city attorney. Probably would be best,
Okay.
sorry, because I don't want to give you the wrong information.
Okay, that's fine.
But normally SDLs are very limited,
Yeah.
and you can only get so many per year, so
Okay.
we would want to be able to extend that without adding up significant costs or legwork for everyone involved.
12 a year.
All right.
Okay? Anybody
Yes,
else?
Jane again?
Mayor, I just have a question. So we're going to just be putting the curfew in place tonight?
That's correct.
Okay. And then, does the city of Omaha have their curfew in place for additional days?
Yes, I believe they issued just a blanket curfew across the 72 hours of their emergency declaration.
And I guess you will keep us apprised if we make
course.
the decision to
Of
extend.
course.
Okay,
Of course.
thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else with any questions at this time? I want to thank you, Mayor, for being very open and communicating very well with us, and it really helps us to kind of keep an understanding and let everybody in the community know all the fun things that we're doing right now.
Well, thank you to all of you for your leadership, for your communication with your constituents, for helping to try and keep people safe, for listening to the important messages from people who are calling for social justice and for the equal value of all lives in our community, but especially to hear the message that Black Lives Matter. I know you're listening. I know I'm listening. I know the police are listening. And we're going to continue to have important and difficult conversations that make this a better city. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda, we would have the Director of the Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department, Pat Lopez. Thank you for coming down. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm just going to give you a brief update on the work that's being done. Right now, we have 1,212 positive cases in Lancaster County. And out of our total cases, 77.1% cases in Lancaster County are just in this past month. We've had 9 of our community members die from COVID-19. And as of yesterday, we had 26 hospitalizations among our residents, and 6 of those were on ventilators. Testing has improved in the past 2 weeks with private labs and Tests Nebraska picking up pace. Bryan is still having their drive-through facility on 27th and Pine Lake between 1 and 4 on weekdays, and CHI's Health, a drive-through at North Star, is from 2 to 6 on the weekdays. Tests Nebraska has moved out of Lancaster County this week. They'll probably be back June 8th and 9th. I'm waiting for the final confirmation. I'll let you know when that is. And I think you've all heard me mention, but about a third of our Lancaster County cases are due to meat processing plants in and around our community. So that represents almost really actually 35% of them. And 257 are employees and 166 are family members or direct contacts of those. And I heard the mayor mention that today we have our new directed health measures in place. And one of the things you'll still see in the one issued for specifically from the health department for our community talks about peddlers are still prohibited, and we still are requiring the face coverings for servers and restaurants. I'll send you a brief summary of the new changes and the directed health measures, so if you have questions from constituents, because there's gathering changes. We visited several places, including the courts, to assist them in how to open up more safely. The legislature, the courts were never closed, however, but in allowing them to expand how they're hearing cases, and that we've been working very closely with them. we'll be working with Pinnacle Bank Arena and looking at their facility and how they might have operations there. We had plans submitted from several areas that we're reviewing. And again, the mayor mentioned we are having, it should come up today or tomorrow on the website under the business planning. So those that are having events that might be over 500 can just fill in a fillable form for them to make it really a lot easier. We'll be able to review that and get back. We're having a lot of questions from the community. We keep really busy. And, you know, I think that speaks highly to our community and wanting to do things, but wanting to make sure they do them as safely as possible for the people they employ and for the people coming in to them. So I'm looking forward to seeing that we can have some expanded outreach with our restaurants, expanding their areas so that they don't have such density and can still provide a large number of services. We're closely monitoring too what's happening in Douglas County, just because they've had, in one day this weekend, they had 243 new cases. So they're seeing really huge increases at a time, so we're monitoring that closely. We're working a lot with our long-term care centers here, both and their organizations across the state and other health departments to help address some of the things we see that are more at the local level that we can really resolve and work together on. We have 34 contact tracers now at the health department that we can use as needed, and 11 are nurses from Lincoln Public Schools, and we're still reaching out and gaining more contact tracers so that we're prepared should we have a need for that. We're monitoring 766 people on a daily basis. And I wanted to also mention that we're in the process of, we lost our relocation site for the People City Mission, so we're on a hunt for a new site, and we've reached out to Council President McGinnis to assist us. We've been having some challenges, but we really want to be able to relocate some of the people staying at the mission to a really safe place to make sure things continue to be really safe at our site. We've had one of the most successful plans for working with our homeless community than others, and I really think it's from being proactive. We're also meeting with the school administrators, both rural, public, private, Catholic. And actually, I'm going to leave here and have a meeting with Steve Joel. We're all working together on what can it look like, and you know, some of our schools are large event centers themselves, and just because of their population. So, and last Friday we had another event at Lincoln High with our cultural centers. Pretty good turnout there, but almost 70 individuals came on our screen. And we're going to be working around the committee. We reached out to Councilmember Shobe to help us engage some community and give us some direction about how we can get the word out as well. And we're going to continue moving across the community in different areas to do more screening. Probably almost 70% of our individuals that have COVID are from a racial or ethnic minority population. So, and I think that speaks a lot to the work that they do and the close contacts they have.
Yeah. Any other questions for, yes, Tammy?
Thank you. So Pat, I want to thank you for your assistance to the rail yard. They contacted me about an event they're trying to push out for June 19th, and they were so grateful for your quick response. So thank you for that. I just wanted to double check, is there, instead of bombarding you all the time with these referrals, is there someone else in your department that you want? But to start with, in the Department of Health, I always just, you're the go-to person on COVID, so.
That's fine. If you just send things to me as council members, unless you know it's some other issue, then I can get it directed out. We're still kind of learning ourselves, but we
Okay.
actually have a team now that looks at things, so that does help. And sometimes I can tell you if we already have gotten a reference too, so, and the other team members might not know that, so.
Okay. Well, we're just grateful, I speak for myself, that, that people in the rail yard or our other constituents would actually ask what they should do. I think that's a good sign
Oh, yes.
of the education process that the Department of Health has done with the virus, that they would reach out to some of their elected officials and say, where do we begin? Because we want them to do it right from the beginning. So I really appreciate your assistance and quick response time, so thank you.
And I appreciate hearing from you when you have constituent questions, because we may not have had those come up, or it may be something we haven't thought of. We're dealing with a lot of new situations that are just usually the normal course of our daily routines, so, but we're looking at them differently, so.
Good, thank you.
Yes.
Pat, I just wanted to know, one, you've been so very helpful, but will you be able to stick around for a little bit after 2:30 so that we can do some one-on-ones? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
We'll go through the rest of these pretty quickly. Planning Department Administrative, that's, everybody's aware, that's in our packet. Finance Department has put their sales tax reporting in that we reviewed. Boards and commissions. At this point, we'll start with the Board of Health.
I think Pat just probably give a more up-to-date update than I would have given that she gave us 2 weeks ago.
Okay. Public Building Commission. Jane, would you like, or I'll report a little bit. We had a short meeting just to approve some pay schedules. Really no changes. We're working hard to finish the front entryway for the Hall of Justice. And the county assessor and the register of deeds offices seem to be going pretty good. They're maybe a little behind on furniture, getting furniture in, but they should be going and should be on time. Trying to think if there was much else. We're just trying to keep it pretty short, just so we could get to pay some of the people for their work and move on. We should have a new budget for some new items coming forward. July, August, is that the end of the year for the Public Building Commission. And Karen and Officer Whitty have been keeping close tabs on our Hall of Justice. I think you've seen some of those emails that have come out, that they're working hard to be open, see if things stay open over there.
Was there any damage from this weekend to the entryway of the Hall of Justice?
Yeah,
Yes.
there was
Windows.
quite a few
But I
windows that were, and paintball
Yeah.
and defaced of
Broken.
the statue and that type
And
of thing.
it was, so in the new construction of the entryway, or was it, I mean?
The new construction was boarded up prior
Okay.
to.
Okay.
So they kind of put boards over the new entry and such. So they really kind of damaged the other windows.
Yeah,
And there were some windows up on the upper level,
On the
that
second floor, too.
yeah, I saw,
second story that were
Yeah.
damaged too.
There's
they-
some paintball up high, too.
thank you.
But they're still working hard to do it, and I condemn our sheriff's department for doing a good job. Okay, Downtown Lincoln Association. Tammy, would you like to? Oh, I
No, we were both there. I think we both left early about the same time, but I know the DLA is working really very closely with downtown businesses and restaurants as the new health measures go into place today. Budget review is going underway as well. Mr. Chair, you may want to add to that. It's
Well, you talked about they're
Rail
gonna
yard
try
event.
to do a rail
Yeah.
yard event.
Right, and the HERDAT, the marketing representative for the rail yard, was present at the DLA Zoom meeting, and we heard a presentation about how cautious they will be regarding that event, and DLA is very supportive of that as well. So that's about it, I
And
think.
then there's two other big projects, as you know, kind of going on through DLA or through downtown. One's the Block 65 redevelopment agreement, and then the Pershing. And they've put together a pretty dynamic group, I think, to review the Pershing proposals that are out there. So we should be hearing at some point back from them on that. And that's about it for now.
DEC?
I have a question about, and this is sort of a mix of the sort of the downtown stuff, and then when you mentioned the Haymarket special event, I know that we've got lots of health suggestions for how to reopen businesses. But I am curious about the bars who do live music and whether or not there have been health measures on vocal music performances. Have those also come forward?
I've
You
not
know of
heard
any-
anything about.
I'm thinking it's the same as it would be for the
Yes.
bar, if they have live music or no music.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just curious about that, since, instrumentalists, there doesn't seem to be a problem with spread, but with vocal music, there is a
It would,
very
yeah.
large problem with spread. And I just want to make certain that we're paying attention to that, and it's one of those areas where we probably wouldn't have gone, oh, yeah. But I think about all the I mean, most specifically, I'm not trying to sail the zoo bar, but, you know, they bring in
Live music.
live
yeah.
music all the time, and they're
Yeah.
singing,
Right.
and that is a small space, and I just, I'm curious whether or not we've thought about that, and I certainly can ask Director Lopez.
I'm sure she has thought about it. I can just say from my perspective and the constituents that I've heard from, which is, I believe, most of the bars on the Haymarket, they are more concerned about just getting the doors open at this
Right.
point. I know that video games, and that's not the right description, gaming,
Mm-hmm.
that some of them are not allowed to do that yet, of course, because of the touching and the other reasons. So I think they're being very cognizant as business owners.
It's gonna
That's-
be,
so that's
it's
what
gonna
I
be
know.
interesting to see her dad's plan in the rail yard itself,
Mm-hmm.
how they're gonna do circles.
Mhm.
and
Pods,
you-
they're selling
Pods, and you would go buy a pod that would allow you so many people to visit, to be in your area. You can put your own chairs down and such. So family units can sit together, and they have to be so far apart. So they're working on all those with the,
Health department,
department.
really closely.
on how they can make that work. But that's open air and
Yeah.
probably staged a little farther back, but I agree with you. In some of
Great
those
question.
places, it's gonna be a little tighter.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other meetings? Anything else anybody would like to report at this time?
We want to.
You have the DC,
Oh, the
DC.
DEC?
but we are having.
And then RTSD, Roy
Yeah.
and James.
Oh, okay, well,
Okay, do you want to mention
Yes,
DEC?
yes,
We're
I'll
gonna
just-
have a-
yeah, so just to say, we'll have a pre-council next week from the District Energy Corporation. There's some changes being made to our articles of incorporation. And we met as a board as well by Zoom recently. And so both the county commissioners and city council will have a pre-council to brief everyone about what those articles of incorporation will now look like. We'll take out the nonprofit status for the DEC board. So next week is our intent. So for June 8th at 1:30 to have a DEC, bring you all up to date.
Would you like to report on the RTSD?
Yeah, we met today.
He's the vice chair.
Okay.
He can report.
Let me pull up the notes real quick. We approved budget for the next year and reviewed some projects and tried to do some planning for the future. I can have more to report formally next week once I've kind of looked through my notes. We just had our meeting like an hour ago.
Okay. Well, good. Any other reports anybody would like to talk about?
We do want to talk about the item on the agenda today, 5D, suspending portions of the Lincoln Municipal Code alcoholic liquor during the current emergency to shorten the application period to allow the city clerk to administratively approve certain outdoor special designated licenses. And here comes our city attorney to tell us about it. And we've had several discussions between the members of the
Internal Liquor
Current
Control
Liquor
Board.
Commission. Yeah, and so you can tell us more about it.
Well, if I could take a step back very quickly to give you the broader overview, which is, you know, the mayor was focused and concerned about the effect the pandemic has had on our restaurants and bars, as I know all of you are. And she was trying to have the city come up with some ideas of how we'd help them now that the bars have reopened, the restaurants have expanded, but they're still very limited in their seating, to see what we could do to help to make their operation more economically viable. And so what we came up with has three parts. And one of them is before you today. The other two parts, though, are the mayor issued a order basically giving the city the ability to relax temporarily certain requirements. For example, for the sidewalk cafe permit, we have in our code requirements that you have permanent railings that limit the size and the footprint of those cafes. Well, this would give the businesses an opportunity to set up temporary railings to increase the footprint just for the term of the pandemic. And then once the pandemic is over with, we'd go back to our regular zoning. It also would allow, for example, Laszlo South, we think of that as a parking lot example because they've got a parking lot, they've got parking requirements. If they wanted to set up a tent, we would relax the parking requirements and we would increase their ability to have a tent up longer. And those are regulations that are there for a good purpose, but it also makes sense in order to help those businesses survive and thrive to relax those temporarily. The changes that would be made by the building and safety and other city officers would keep in mind why those regulations are there in the first place. We would not want to do anything that would limit their ability to operate in a safe manner. But that's the first step that the mayor has already taken. The second step is related to this, and that has to do with the SDLs, because liquor laws are established by the state and can only be relaxed by the state. There are some people from the city that have a meeting set up with the governor's office Wednesday morning, I believe, to discuss with the governor's office and with the State Liquor Commission whether they would be supportive of temporarily relaxing the rules on SDLs to allow them to be longer than 6 days and also to speed up the process. So if someone wanted to have an SDL, they wouldn't have to wait 20 or 30 days in order to do that. So that brings me to the ordinance that is before you today. And we put this on the agenda without really having a chance to discuss it with you because we wanted to get it moving down the track, understanding that this is something that you have an interest in, but it is before you and you can do with it what you would like next week. It is twofold. The first would delegate to the city clerk your authority on SDLs. This is an authority that you've already delegated to the city clerk for SDLs that are not on public property. So for those of you that are relatively new to the council, new within the last year or so, it used to be Cappies would come in pretty much monthly and say, I want an SDL, I'm doing an event, a wedding reception or whatever. And at some point the council said, we don't need to see this gentleman from Cappies, although we like him. He's been doing these for years, he knows what he's doing, and so you delegated to the city clerk the ability to approve those SDLs. This ordinance, among other things, would delegate temporarily the authority that you have to authorize SDLs on public property, sidewalks, streets, and so on. So that's one item. The other item, and they're separate, so if you chose to, you could amend this and approve one and not approve the other. But the other item just would relax the requirement that if you want an SDL, you have to apply for it 21 days before the SDL goes into effect. And that, again, is to allow businesses to move quickly during this pandemic situation to make the changes they need to do to maintain their economic viability. So that kind of gives you a broad overview of what this is all about.
So, in discussions with members of the Internal Liquor Committee, our assessment is that we probably would not want to give up city council oversight on this issue. But one of our suggestion is, and talking with Jeff Kirkpatrick, is that we go ahead and have the hearing and look at things. But one of the things we can do without giving up the city council authority is we could vote to suspend our rules to speed the process. So whenever a liquor license SDL comes in front of us, we can suspend the rules and vote the same day it comes on first reading. Mm-hmm. And that would keep our time commitment to this process as small as possible while still maintaining oversight. So that's, I think, our proposal to the council at large, that we do that. But I think it's important that it be discussed in the total context, and I agree with our city attorney that we should have the hearing on it.
Yeah, and I guess part of my wanting to understand the rationale, I know that there's a desire to shorten the amount of time it takes for the applications to proceed, and I wanted to know if the city had some idea how short of a time you were looking at. Were you looking at, I mean, anything less than 21 days is shorter, but are you looking for 7 days, 10 days? What's your internal goal?
Well, I think 0 days as far as applying before. It still has to go through the process, both on the state level and on the local level. And so if this is amended so the council retains the authority, but with the understanding that you would vote on first reading after hearing, you still have to get the application in, we have to get on the council agenda, and you have to come up for first reading. So that would create that period, and it maintains the public transparency where there'd be a hearing and the applicant would appear before you. So we're focused less on going for 21 days to 5 as reducing it as much as possible.
Right.
And still going through the process.
Right. I really like the idea of the public transparency. I mean, I understand we may be reducing the amount of time for testimony or hearing, but especially when we're talking about SDLs on public property, I think I want the public to be able to have that opportunity to know about it in advance.
And the intent was never, the desire was never to take away the hearing. It was all focused on, and I know all of you have heard from business owners that are talking about survival and trying to shorten that period up to allow them to make some practical changes that would keep them in business.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. And we'll have a public hearing during our meeting today also.
And then vote next week, and if you would like, I can prepare an amendment
Amendments.
taking out Section 1 essentially and leaving in Section 2.
Okay.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
If I could have just one brief minute.
Jane, did you have a question on
I
this?
do have a question on
Yes.
another item, but go ahead with yours.
No, I wanted to respond to the question that you asked the mayor earlier about the folks that were detained for curfew violations last night. And our prosecutor is here, so she can correct me if I make a mistake. But my understanding is that everyone that was detained last night went to court this morning. The majority of them, I think 35 of them, went ahead and pled guilty. The standard fine was $350. There were some of them that posted bond, and I think it was 1,000 percentage, which would have gotten them out if they posted $100 or a PR bond. At least one of them received a PR bond. So that's what happened. I don't know that they've all been released, have had a chance to post bond. There may be some that are sitting out fines, for example.
I think the current concerns that I'm hearing from constituents was some of the tactics that were used by law enforcement, that I guess it was their understanding that the individuals who violate the curfew would have it explained to them, be issued a citation, and should they not disperse and go back to their homes, that they would be arrested, and that the arrest is at the very last option. And I think many individuals expressed that they were startled that the officers, advanced on them and used tear gas and shot tear gas in the crowd. Understandably, I think people were quite upset with the violence and the property destruction that occurred, the extensive property destruction that occurred the night before. I wanted to have a better understanding when I reached back to these individuals to explain this is the expectation that we have of how law enforcement will manage this situation. And I didn't know if it was going to be handled a little bit differently tonight.
Well, and I can't speak to the details because, we kind of come in on the front and the back end and not in the middle. But what I would say is what happened over the weekend is something that does not typically happen in Lincoln, which is good. We live in a community that doesn't see that sort of destruction or those types of arrests on a regular basis. But what that does put us in the position of, as far as law enforcement agencies, is we're less prepared than we would be for maybe some larger communities to how to deal with those kinds of demonstrations. As simple as, how do we process when we're arresting people for a curfew violation or for failure to disperse in a way that's efficient and effective? And you saw that live last night, where just the whole process was not what I think people would hope for. Will it be different tonight? I'm sure that it will be. Are law enforcement officers learning from their experience? I think I can guarantee that they are.
Thank you. I have a question.
Yes, James?
The people that were detained, I think you mentioned, what were they charged with again?
I think they were charged with a curfew violation under the mayor's order yesterday, issuing the curfew. So under the city code, the mayor has that authority, and then if you violate the curfew, if you violate that order, it's essentially a city misdemeanor.
So it's considered a misdemeanor then?
Yeah, a city misdemeanor, which is punishable by up to 6 months in jail or a $500 fine or a combination thereof.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff, I have another question on 5C. I think many of us received the note from Tom Houston on this, and then if you could clarify on 5C, we're approving it for TNNG Capital, but are they still requiring access in a driveway that is in violation of the access management
Here comes
policy?
the answer, man.
Oh,
And Tim C. will also be here.
okay,
I know during the meeting if you have questions for the law department as well.
okay.
Mr. Marvin? Director Marvin?
Your question?
Well, I guess I'm reading what Tom Houston sent to us, and the staff is recommending approval for TNNG Capital,
Correct.
but have they given up their request to have access in a driveway from their surplus property to the 27th Street?
No. So what you have before you, if it's okay,
I guess.
I have to say the same thing after 3, but we advertised this property for sale. Property was put up for sale, I think, last fall. I went to the commercial realtors luncheon, announced it, so it was a long time ago. And we had 2 offers for the purchase of this property. One offer was a purchase from Broadmoor, which is the apartment project that borders this, the same people that had offered to buy this property previous.
Mm-hmm.
They offered $400,000. We had advertised this as limited access, meaning access could be taken off of 27th Street. They would build a deceleration lane at their cost. The doctors that proposed to buy the property need access to put a surgical office in that location. And we worked on a zoning agreement and a use that we felt gave limited amounts of access to this property and did not have high impacts on AM and PM trip counts. But it is change, or it is an adjustment to the access management policy, and this goes all the way back to the time when Chief Cassidy was LTU chair. He had a lot of knowledge about this particular location, many years of history on this, and he believed that providing access to expedite the sale of this property was appropriate in this particular case. So he authorized the deviation for the access management. Subsequent to us working out an agreement with the doctors, we I informed Tom Houston, who represents Broadmoor, and told him that they were not the highest offer, that the offer would allow for access, and this would have probably been in December of last year. and Mr. Houston didn't know if Broadmoor was interested in the property anymore, and that was kind of the end of that conversation. Then had a conversation again with Mr. Houston as this showed up on your agenda, and he said that Broadmoor was going to submit the letter that you have before you and offer to buy the property at the same price that is the offer that you have before you, and that they would not take access to off of 27th Street. And I think you'll probably hear essentially the same thing
Okay.
from me and from Mr. Houston in about 30 or 40 minutes.
But who's recommending the approval between T and NG Capital?
We are. And the reason we're doing that is they were the highest offer. We entered into a negotiation with them.
Okay.
They've offered agreements, and they followed the rules that we laid down for them, that they would be able to take access off 27th Street. And that's the way we proceeded in this particular case. But so essentially you have their offer before you and a proposal from Mr. Houston, his client, and Broadmoor offering the same amount and not taking access.
And I guess the reasoning to accept TNNG's offer was because they're an office building and a medical facility, and the trip counts would be less than
Generally most other uses that could go on that spot, yes.
that would be more compatible with the fire station in terms of a neighbor.
It would have a lower profile in terms of the height of the building. I don't know that we were looking necessarily for compatibility. Basically, if we don't allow access, we have only one person that this property can be sold to.
Got it.
And I think that the previous discussion that this council looked at years earlier was that the offer that was from Broadmoor was not sufficient to warrant the sale to Broadmoor.
So I'm just trying to think, have we ever had to deal with a situation like this before?
Michelle, up in our office, I would say she'll probably be here as well,
Okay.
and will tell you that this is very unusual.
Okay.
If in her career, I don't think she's ever seen competing offers being proposed to the city council at the same time.
Yeah, I don't recall that ever happening either.
Do you have a question? I'm not a good auctioneer on this, but my only thoughts on this is that they've been in negotiations and worked this through with a purchase. Thing that's different about this than maybe being in is now they have to come forward and show what the price is. They've already negotiated it. The owners or the sellers are ready to sign, and so it has to come to us. So there's been many times I said, well, maybe I'll come in and offer another 1,000 or two for the same property. But this has already been worked through the process. We don't have a purchase agreement from the other party. This is one that's being brought forward to us at this time.
Okay, thank you. I needed that explanation.
One other quick thing, yes.
Mr. Chair, I have one other item, and this is in regards to the Hepburn Square, and there is a clerical change on Hepburn Square that you will be getting a substitute amendment on that one. Basically what it does is that on Schedule C, it shows presently in your packet $1,500,000 is the investment by the developer, and that amount will be changed to 1.2 million because that's what it was always assumed to be. There's a clerical change here. And the other thing that you will see is that within the agreement there is not agreement, because on Schedule C it will show a facade improvement number of $75,000 for the allocation of tax increment financing. And then a section number, and I'm not sure, it might be section 304, actually writes out $60,000. And so the agreement that you will get as a substitute will make those clerical changes, and that will be available to you when we go into the voting session.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, Dan.
Seeing none. Do we have anything else for now? Okay. Do we need a motion to adjourn?
We're not, are we adjourning? 'Cause I wanted to talk to.
Yeah.
some directors.
Yeah, we should
We will
just
go ahead
adjourn.
and adjourn, and you can go talk to the directors.
Okay.
And we'll be back here at 3 o'clock.
Is that a new clock?